Hi, and welcome to Matchmove for Production by VFX Tutors. I'm Josh, and in this video we'll be moving on to shot MM009. What we'll do first is we'll just play through the shot so we can see what we're going to track, then we'll open 3DEqualizer. Okay, so we've opened up 3DEqualizer. We can see that we've got our basic user interface, which gives us all our windows that we need to complete the shot. If you do not see this, it could possibly be that you're in maybe a basic or the default layout. So what we'll do, if you go to environments at the bottom left and click on basic, this will now give us the complete basic user interface setup, which will give us all our windows and our tabs that we need to complete the shot. So the first thing that we need to do is load in the image sequence. So if you've downloaded a data package, that's great because you can follow through the tutorial step by step, and it'll be a massive advantage to you because you'll have all the data to create a Matchmove reel, and you won't have to go out and shoot some stuff because it's already there. And say if you're using it for a personal project they want to add CG into, it's great as well because you always have all the data to go with it as well. So what we need to do is if we select our camera up here in the top left, and it should be highlighted yellow for our active camera. So now if we go to live action footage over on the right, and you should be in the camera tab here, so if you're in any of these you won't see it, so make sure you're in your camera tab. Then go to live action footage and click browse. Now you want to navigate to your shot, which is MM009, the abandoned car park. We'll go down to our plates, and here's our image sequence. So if you're seeing it something like this, you want to make sure that you're on sequence view, so you can bring in the entire sequence. Click OK. So now we can see it's really dark because our image sequence has already been transcoded into a linear color space. So that's all done for you. You don't have to worry about doing any of that. So we can see it a little bit better, what we can do, if we go to our camera tab again, and just below the live action footage, there'll be an 8-bit color conversion. If we click on the little triangle and open it up, we'll have these options. So if we go to select our gamma, and we'll put it at 2.2, so we can now view it at the correct color range. So if we scrub through our timeline, we can't really play through it or anything, so it's quite laggy. So the first thing that we want to do is make an image cache for it, or a buffer compression file. So first, before we do that, we need to save our scene. So we go 3D4 at the bottom left, and save project as. What I'll do, I'll just make a new folder in here. Make sure you click in there. Click on the little triangle so I know we're in that folder. So if I click down at File, what I'll do, I'll call it the exact same name as the shot, so I know that this file corresponds with that image sequence. Underscore cam, so I know it's the camera, and it's the version 1. And if I click OK, that'll save out. So now I want to go to playback, down here at the bottom, and now we want to click on export buffer compression file, and this will cache out all our frames for us. So this could take a while, so what I'll do, I'll fast forward through it. Okay, so that's exported. So the next thing we need to do is click on import buffer compression file. And this will import it in, and it should be much quicker. So now if we press spacebar, we can play through and we can see what our camera's doing. And it's another handheld. All these shots are going to be handheld, so it's going to be the best to learn your tracking and stuff like that. So cool. So what we want to do is we want to set up our lens first. So if we go over to our right at the bottom, click on our lens, and we want to fill out our sensor size and our focal length. So what we want to do, if you go to your data package and open up your camera data, you should have this. And as always, we won't have very much data because we're going to try and do this all with as minimal data as possible, because that's pretty much what happens most of the time anyway. So we know what our camera is, and we know what our sensor size is, and we know what type of lens was used. So what I always do, I always work with the film back height and leave the width on passive, because I don't know if this has been cropped or anything, but if we type this value into our film back width, it should give us the correct sensor size width anyway, if this is correct. So what we'll do, we'll type that in. So if we type in 11.88, and you need to make sure that you put the millimeters in there, otherwise if you don't, it will do it to centimeters and it'll be completely wrong. So we need to make sure we put 11.88 millimeters, so it's at the correct size. And you can see our film back width has given us the correct width as well on passive. So what we'll do, we'll leave the focal length on 30 because we don't know what the focal length is, and what we'll do, we'll figure out our focal length from our lineups like we've done on all the previous shots. So our next step is to bring in our set geo. So now if we go over to our top left where it says point groups, if you click on this little arrow, it will drop down and give us some more choices. And if you right click on 3D models, click add new and click on import OBJ file. So now you want to go to your data package, then scroll down to set geo, go to set geo again, and then you should have an abandoned car park set geo VO4. As you can see, there's nothing in here, so we go to press F5. Now we can see the geometry, but it's not really showing us much. So if we click center models, it's not showing us all of it, but it's giving us a good idea of what we can see. So now if we hold shift and press right click and drag, we can now sort of zoom out and we can sort of figure out our orientation. So if you hold shift and left click, we can rotate around. So you can notice this side of the geo is not this side, so if we rotate around the other way, we should start seeing the correct lining up for our geo. And we can see this rail and this sort of ramping up bit. So if we hold shift and right click and drag, we can sort of push back as well. So with our lineups, as we always do, at the moment I'm currently on frame 216, which is not, it shows us a lot, but it doesn't show us what we need. So I'm actually going to scrub all the way back to the first frame, so we can see this, because where I was, I couldn't really, 206, couldn't really see that pillar, and that would be quite useful to give us lineup reference. So I'll actually go back to the first frame, because I think this might be our best lineup frame. And I'll hold shift and middle mouse click, and what I'll do, I'll just click in, I'll drag this until this is sort of lined up here, and I'll right click and drag, sort of scale it up, and left click to rotate around. It doesn't have to be perfect, we can just get it sort of close-ish so we can roughly line it up. So quite happy with that rough lineup. So what we can do now, if we select our model in our 3D models tab up here, if we click on the abandoned car park geo and click on, go over to the right where it says texture mapping and UV map, click on UV map, then go to your set geo folder and click on texture. Now we want to bring in the car park abandoned TIFF, click OK, and as you can see can't see anything at the moment. So if we click on show polygons and hide lines, we can now see we've got a pretty good representation of our area that we want to track. We can see all the areas that we can do our single frame lineups. So what we want to do, we want to go to F2, and what we can do, we can start picking out points on our image sequence that we can line up to. So what I'll do, these are the most recognizable parts here, so I'll control left click to create a new point. We're not going to track these, we're just leaving them as single frames. And we'll just go around and we'll pick really recognizable points on our plate that we can see in our geometry. Which we can see here, and see that, and we can see all these details. So if we go back to F2, if I control left click here to create a track, like I say, we're not tracking it, we're just doing one single frame. There's this little splodge here, and I bet we can just about make it out there. So select that. And we'll go around the back, so we want to get some good stuff at the back as well. So I'll control left click here. I'll do this bit here as well. Control left click. And let's do that one there as well. So control left click. So what we'll do, we'll go to select our first point. Then we'll go to F5. We can flick between the two. So we're not that far off, but we're not really on it. So with that selected, and go to extract polygon here, the bottom left of your screen. Then you should get the zebra line, and everything should be highlighted. So wherever you click is going to be where it's going to be placing a 3D point. So if you left click now, it's created this green cross, which is a 3D point, which is basically telling 3D that wherever you're tracking this 2D point in 3D space, that's where it is. So now if we go to F6, we can see that we've put a point here, and that's the 3D point. So we want to do that for all of our other tracks. So if we go back to F2, then we'll select our second track, which is this other bay line. We go to F5, and we can see it's fairly close already. So if we go extract polygon, just click right in that corner, and you can see it starting to pull it in. So if we go to our second point, sorry, our third point, and get this little splodge on this pillar, go to F5, extract polygon, select the splodge. If we go to F2, select the fourth point. Now we've got this sort of, I guess, a cable or a gap in the concrete. So we go to F5. We can see it's this one here. So we can extract polygon again and click in there. And you can see it's starting to line up quite nicely already. But we'll still go through every single point. So the fifth. You go to F5 and we can see it's here. So if we click on extract polygon, select there, we can see it's not quite lining up now because it's probably because we're at the wrong focal length, but it's fine because we'll figure out the correct focal length once we've surveyed all of these. So now if we go to F2 and select our sixth point, we can see that we've selected this little gap here on the concrete as well. So we go to F5, select extract polygon, and we'll click in the same place. So what we can also do, let's actually do some of these on these bars because it'd be quite useful. So we'll do one on the top of this bar. We'll press F5 and we can see how far off it is. So if we select extract polygon, we'll sort of get it roughly in there. So hopefully that should help. Maybe let's do one down here as well. So we go F2, create another point with control left click, and we go to F5. We'll select extract polygon and click where we think it is. So now if we press Alt and C, it will bring up this window and it's going to solve the camera position. And you'll see it's only got one little red dot, which is one keyframe. And these yellow dots are 2D points represented in 3D space. These are the ones we surveyed. So now if we click Use Result, and if we click on the 3D Models tab here, we can see we're fairly close, but we're not good enough yet. So what we'll do is we'll adjust our lens so we can get a more accurate lens. So now if we go over to our lens tab and click on go to focal length, we'll see our focal length is just set at the default 30. So now what we want to click on fixed and change it to adjust. And now we want to go to the bottom left here where it says Windows and click on parameter adjustment window. Sorry. And what we'll do, it will open up this window, and this will give us a parameter that we can adjust for our focal length. So what we want to do, we'll change our method to adaptive, and now we want to click adjust, and you can see now it's figuring out the best fit focal length for this shot, and it's come to 27.27. So we'll transfer the parameters. We'll click on our screen and press Alt-C again, and we'll use the result. And now if we flip between our 3D models, we can see that we're pretty much perfect actually. We're pretty bang on. So I'm happy with that lineup straight away. We're pretty good. So because now we know this is 27mm, or it could be 28, but we'll stick with 27s. What we can do now, because we've got no distortion on this at the moment, we can do our lens grid. So now we know it's a 27, we can solve for a 27mm lens grid. So if we go up to the top left, where it says abandoned car park, we can select our camera, then right click and add new. Then you want to add a new reference camera. And this should make a ref-2 camera under your sequence camera. So now if you double click on that, everything will disappear, because we need to go to the live action footage and click on browse. So now what you want to do, you want to go over to your data package and click on lens grid, open it up, select it. If we click on sequence view, you can see all of them. So we don't actually have a 27.27, but we have a 28, so we'll select that and click OK. So that should bring in us our lens grid. So we need to go over to the F3 window, which is our distortion grid. Now if we zoom in, we should see this little rectangle with red lines and dots, which is our distortion matrix. So what we want to do, I always start off with the top left because it's just what I do. And if you click and hold the point, you should highlight in red, and you'll get this little zebra line up here. And if you just let go, it should snap into these corners, which is exactly what you want. So now if you click and hold on the next one, you want to bring it to the same square. You don't want to do a square like this, because you can do, but for these, we'll make sure that we use one single cell of a square. So if you click and drag on to the corners and do something like this, so we've got 3 points pinned into these corners. And if you've got a good lens grid that's shot nice and cleanly, you can just go down to the bottom here where it says snap. And if you click snap, it will snap the rest into place. So now we need to fill out the rest of this lens grid. So if we hold Control and press up on our keyboard, you can see we're adding more rows to this column that we've created, and hold Control and press down, and we're continuing to fill out this lens grid down. So now we need to do left and right, so it's going to be Control left, and now we're going to fill out this lens grid all the way as far as we can go, and Control right to go right. And what you want to do, you want to fill this entire lens grid out so it looks exactly like this. If you go over, that's fine, it's not a problem, because 3DE will automatically know that these are incorrect and it will disable them. But if you want to delete them, you can hold Shift and the same direction. So I'm going to press Shift and right, and that will delete the ones from the right. So now what we want to do, we want to go up to the top here where it says Calc, click on Calc, and click on Calc Distortion and Camera Geometry. We don't need to change anything here. All we need to do is click on Calc Lens Parameters. And now it will solve all our parameters for us, and it will give us some details down here saying our deviations 0.3 of a pixel, which is good. So if we set parameters and close, we can see nothing's happened, but if we click on this in Distort tab here, we can see how much distortion that it's removing from the plate. And as we can see, because it's not really removing that much, but it might just be enough to help our lineup. So we're now done with this distortion grid. So if we go up to our top left and double click on our sequence camera to highlight it in yellow, we can now see how much of this distortion is affecting our plate by clicking on this Undistort tab. So if we go to F5, show our 3D model again. If we press Alt-C to resolve our camera and click Use Result, and we flick between two, we can pretty much, that looks pretty much perfect. And we can double check if we select. So we don't need a texture anymore because we've got a really good lineup. So if we select our geometry, then go back to where it says UV map and turn off show polygons, and we can show lines. Now we can see how good our lineup is. So all of this lines up really well. All our railings are lining up. This pillar is lining up really well. It's all just pretty much bang on. And this is what we want to achieve for pretty much all our shots, because if our team is working on something here and we're waiting for image sequences that haven't come in, but we can still model and animate stuff here. And if you get everything perfect like this, the whole team will know that it's all going to work perfectly. So it does rest quite heavily on making sure that your cameras are correct in the pipeline and in production. So this is really important. So now we've got a really good lineup. What I'll do one more time is if I go to our parameter adjustment, I'll clear that and I'll just solve our focal length one more time, because now we have distortion. It might change ever so slightly, which it has, but it's changed such a little amount you won't even notice. So we've done our single frame lineup. So what we want to do is we click on store pose, and this will make a little red keyframe and it will store our camera position. So if you do lose it or it breaks, you can click on recall pose, but remove pose is right next to it, so make sure you don't accidentally click on remove. But for safety, we'll store our single frame solve, so if it does go wrong, you can just recalculate and it's all there. So what we'll do, if we select this top one, hold shift and left click again, select them all. We right click and add new point set, and if you have to click in here and type SF for single frame. So now if we select all these again, select the top one, shift and left click, and then click the middle mouse roller and drag them onto the FS folder. So we click this little arrow to open up. So what we need to do, we need to disable these so they're not active when we do our tracking, otherwise it will cause havoc. So if we right click on them, go to modify, and then go down to calculation and go disabled. So now they're off, what we want to do, we want to hide them so we don't get mixed up with any of our other tracks. So if we go to view here and just hide selected points. So we're done with our single frame lineup and we've tidied it all away. If we now go to F2, we can start tracking. So we can get rid of this FOV in the middle for our lens centers. So if we go to view here, click on show FOV, that'll get rid of it. So now what we want to do, we want to start tracking some points. So I'm going to pick this section here with control left click, and I'm going to leave our tracking marker at the default size, and I click gauge marker and track. You can see it's going flailing around wildly. So if I click on center 2D, we're now centering around this point we're tracking. So now you can see that what point is tracked. And now we want to go around and get a really nice spread of all these points, so we're not biasing to an area of the plate. So what I'll do, I'll just readjust this so we get some more detail in our tracking box. I'll click gauge marker, click track. It's a little bit ropey near the end, but it seems like it'll be alright. That's a bit wobbly, so what we'll do, we'll just gauge mark again, track that. So what we'll do, we'll go around and select some bits that are quite clear. So this is quite a contrasting bit. So if I click gauge marker and track, cool. So pick some more points. See that all the way, we want to select points that we see all the way through. So what I'll do, so we get this point down here, gauge marker and track. So you get a lot of blur of the handheld stuff, which can make it tricky sometimes, but we'll do this cigarette bottle. little white strip, gauge marker and track. This might go behind the pillar. We'll stop it before it does. And we'll just end the point. You need to make sure you end your point, otherwise it will continue on going. So you need to make it disappear. So we'll do this bit here as well. Control left click, gauge marker and track. And that's going to come off, so we'll go to our keyframe before it goes off and we'll end the point. So now it disappears. So let's get some more stuff. Let's get this post here. So we're going to get quite a lot, because there's quite a lot of distance going across here. There's going to get a lot of parallax here, so we'll just try and reduce it a little bit. And if we gauge marker, track, and you can see in there there's quite a lot of background movement, so this may not be a good place to track. So what we'll do instead, we'll track this point down here if we can. Click gauge marker, track. And it goes a bit funny, so if we scroll back before it goes a little bit funny, we can bring our tracking box up and make it a little bit larger. Click gauge marker again and track. So what we can do, let's see what bits we can get. Let's get something on this pillar at least. Let's get that splodge. Gauge marker and track. What we'll do is stop it before it goes off. We'll end the point. Let's see if we can get this cigarette butt here. Gauge marker and track. So if we select all our points, we can have a look at the area we've tracked. And we can scrub for our timeline. We've got a fairly alright spread where we can survey. Maybe let's try and get something. Let's maybe get this bit here as well. So control left click, gauge marker and track. We've tracked a lot of stuff that we can project onto geometry. We've tracked nothing in this background. So what we can do, we can try and track one of these windows, gauge marker and track. You can see the further away it is and a bit of focus, the worse the sort of blur will be for the jitters. If we end that point, what we can do this corner of this window here as well. Gauge marker and track. Let's see over the other, how much that other side do we see? So we see this pretty much all the way through. Let's do this here. Gauge marker and track. So if we look at all our points, we've got some good far background ones and a lot of good points we can survey onto. So now if we go to F5, and if we go to our frame that we did our lineup on, what we can do, we can select all our points that we've tracked to the ground, and we can go edit and project points onto 3D models. And we've got 9 of 9 points successfully projected onto that model. If you click OK, so now if you press Alt and C, this will open up our solving window. And as you can see, it's created our red keyframes, and you can sort of see it's a very handheld motion. You can see the walking motion here. And it's created our 2D points in, well, it's created our 3D points in 3D space. So these background ones are actually quite important, because these probably going to be created in maybe a slightly incorrect depth, but we'll see. So if we click use result, you can see we've got something quite funny going on here. So it's kind of quite spiky. It's possibly because of the motion blur. And if we have a look where it spikes up, it's quite hard to tell. But what we can do, if we go to our deviation browser tab here, click on it, and go to show point deviation curves and active points only, we can have a look and see which ones are causing us problem. And this one here looks like it's causing us a massive problem. And let's zoom in and have a look. So it looks like it's definitely projected on, possibly into the wrong depth. So if we actually survey free this, because even though these models look pretty close to the plate, they may not be like 100% perfect, but they're close enough. But if you press Alt C again and resolve that, click use result, and you can see it's sort of fixed our big jump, but we still have some issues here. So what we can do, we'll go to our parameter adjustment again, we'll clear it, and we can adjust our focal length, just to double check that it's not going to change anything. Change very slightly, but won't really make much of a difference. So if we press Alt C, we can see it's not really made much difference. So the next one would be, let's select this one. If we survey free that and press Alt C, let's see what that does. You can see it's reduced it quite a bit. So this one here is causing us quite a bit of problems. So we'll go to F2 and have a look, see what it's doing. So it is very jittery, and it does slip, because you can see how it's slipping there. That's really not good. So that if your tracks are doing something like this, they're really going to screw up your solve. So I'm going to just delete that, because that's not very good. I probably shouldn't have tracked that area, because just looking at it now, this is actually a ledge, this isn't a bar, so I probably should have tracked something up here. So if I control left click on that bit, click gauge marker and track. I know that this is flat on the wall. Oh, it's broke, it stopped. So I'll scroll back, I'll reduce the tracking box size a bit tight around it, click gauge marker, click track. And it's tracking quite nicely, because you can see here, even that white dot, that's moving left and right. That's not really a very good place to track, because that's a ledge, and there'll be some parallax in that. So if I press Alt C and use result, you can see it's pretty much fixed everything. We've got some really quite high spikes here, which we'll have a look at. If we go to F5 and have a look at what our solver's doing, we can press play, spacebar to play it. As you can see, all our geometry is sticking really well. There's absolutely no slipping going on. So if you put something here, it would not slip. It would be perfect. So the next thing we can do, we can have a look at some of these. Most of this is alright, because I imagine this is just from the jitteriness of the plate. What we can do, we can take this really big one here and see if we can fix that. So if we go to the frames where it's mostly peaking, and if we just use our left and right keys on our keyboard and just go through, make sure you're on center 2D, because if you're not, you won't see anything, you'll just see it do that. So make sure you're on center 2D. And if we look at our deviation browser, and if we just go through the frames that's peaking, so we can see it's tracking nicely here, then it hits that spike in the graph, and you can see it's popping off. So what I'll do, I'll use my number pad, so I'll press 1 and 2, just tap those, and it will slightly nudge it. So you might not be able to see, but if I hold 1 down, you can see it's moving the point ever so slightly. So I'll press 9 to undo that. So if I go through this keyframe here, so 199 to 200, and flick between the two, I want to adjust the 200 keyframe so it doesn't look like it's slipping, so it looks like it's pinned into place. And it's quite difficult with the motion blur, but you can sort of see now that's staying in the same place. Now I want to go from 200 to 201, and I can see that sort of moving now, so I'll use my number pad to move it in the direction I want. So I'm pressing 4, now I'm pressing 1 to bring it down diagonally. I need to move it a bit better, so you want to make sure that this is pinned on top, and use your number pad to nudge it in the direction you want it to go. See, it pops out a little bit there. Cool, so we've gone through and tidied that, so if you press Alt-C now, and use result, we see we've reduced it quite a bit. I've not completely got rid of it, but because this image sequence is quite blurry and jittery, it's going to be quite difficult for it to figure out. So if we go to F5, we can just have a look at everything. So if we stop that actually, and if we select this point and click on our center 3D, and we can scrub through our timeline, and we can see that 3D point is pretty much stick on. We can see actually how much jitter is in the plate by looking at the red dot is what we've tracked. But the 3D point is perfect, and that's what we need to worry about at the moment, to be honest. If your 2D points are as good as they can get, your 3D points will be even better. So playing through that, everything's lined up really well. All these bars, even this edges up here is lining up really well, and everything around it. So it's all tracking really well. So as for the 3D slides, we're done. We've completed the track. So the next thing that we need to do is export out the necessary things that we need to go further with the shot. So we need to export out a camera, a nuke LD node, and we need to render out a undistorted plate. So what I'll do first, I'll save this, but like always, if you click on your model and go to 3D model, see, I haven't done it, but I always check that I have, and make sure that this is reference only, so we don't want big file sizes. So if you go to 3DE4, and save project as, and I'll just overwrite mine, but you can version up. So first of all, we'll export out our camera. So if we go to 3D4 at the bottom left, click on Export Project, and click on Maya, or whatever software that you're planning to use it in. So I'll make sure my start frame is exactly the same start frame as our image sequence, so it's 1001. So I'll export a file, I'll do that in the same place, and I'll call it the exact same name as the image sequence. So I know that this camera corresponds to this image sequence. And what I'll do, I'll select all of this, and I'll right click and copy, so I'm probably going to type this in a couple times. So if I click OK, click OK again, this will create a MEL script for our camera. So now if we click on File, Export, Nuke LD 3D for Distortion node, and it should open up this window. If we go File Name, if we right click and paste in here, what we need to do, sometimes it doesn't set, once you've pasted once, you might have to copy it again, so I'll select it all again, and I'll copy, but instead of cam, I want to call this Nuke LD node. So we know that's our distortion node for the compositors to reapply distortion after they finish their comps. So now I'll click OK. So now finally the last thing to do is render out a undistorted plate for reference in Maya. So if we go to 3DE4, run warp 4, and it will save. and now it will open up this window. So if we go down to here, click on our warp footage, and we can click preview. We can click between two, and we click between the two, and we can see how much distortion we're going to be removing, which is not very much. So if we go to our destination footage and click on save footage, we'll leave this as OpenEXR, and what we'll do, we'll change our scale to 50%, and we click preview again. We're going to reduce it by 50% because it will make it easier to work within Maya. So now we need to go to browse, and you want to go to your directory you're working with all your stuff. So what I'll do, I'll just go to the data package, and I'll put it in my folder, but you will need to make sure you make a new directory, because when you render this out, it's going to spit out loads of images, and you don't want to just spray them everywhere all over your file structure. So what I'll do, I'll call this the same name as the image sequence. And I'll put UDP. UDP is for undistorted plate. I forgot to paste it. No, see, it loses its copy and paste. So if we go and you need to make sure that at the end of this, you make sure you put .4 hashes .exr, and if you don't do this, it will just render out one image, and doing this will tell what for that you're rendering out an image sequence. So if you click OK, and now you click render, this could take quite a while, but you should start getting some green keyframes up in here, which is basically signifying that that frame's rendered. So here they're starting to appear now. So what I'll do, I'll just fast forward through this section because it could take quite a while. Cool, so that's rendered out. So what we can do is we can click on File up at the top left, click on that, and exit Alt4. And now if you haven't, you can save it. Other than that, we're now finished in 3D. We've got a pretty decent solve for something that's handheld and a bit jittery at some places. But yeah, our next step is to go into Maya and set up our camera. If you guys enjoyed this tutorial, hit that like button and subscribe for more like this.